Welcome back to another video, everyone. It's Citizen X, and today it's another video in the Trigkey series. Today it's going to be pushing the Trigkey Mini PC to its absolute gaming limits. This request comes in from Nero Caesar. He wanted to know, can I make a video pushing the Mini PC to its gaming limits, because he wants to get one and he's not quite sure whether the graphics chip inside this is quite up to scratch running the games he wants to play. Well, no problem. Here we go. Well, let's start with something quite simple. We've got to get a benchmark, haven't we? So let's try Bloons TD6. This is a game that's quite easy to run. We're running it in 1440p, and as you can see from the benchmarking software in the top left, we're looking at about 100 FPS. I think we have a few drops down to 90 FPS. There's a lot of stuff on the screen. It handled it well, so on to the next one. Now we're looking at War Thunder. War Thunder's playing here in 1080p, and we're on the medium preset. That's what was recommended when I ran the benchmarking software. War Thunder automatically picked up that, hey, medium's good for you, so let's test it out. It looks here that on takeoff we're sort of hovering around 60 FPS, but we'll see what it looks like when we actually get into combat, when we start firing rockets off, when we start actually blowing things up and the physics engine has to work and stuff like that. So we'll go for this anti-aircraft gun here. We'll fire off a few rockets, see what can happen. So we've got quite a few rockets in the air there. We're hovering around 60 FPS. Seems alright. Doesn't look like any of them are going to hit, but I never promised that I was good. So let's get a bit closer and try again. Ripple off some rockets here. We might have to finish them off with the guns. Explosions are going off. We're on down to about 55 FPS, 50 FPS when we use the gun and blow it up. In the cockpit here, when we're a bit higher in the air, having to render more of the map, hovering around that 50 FPS mark. Let's see what happens when we go out and fire a missile off here. See what happens when we explode this plane. Kaboom! 70 FPS, dropping down to about mid-60s. So, War Thunder on the medium settings. That's a pass from me. So moving up to something a little bit more harder to run. This is Minecraft, running pretty much on fancy graphics at 1080p. The benchmarking software didn't run on this, unfortunately, but I think you can see it's running at a steady 60 to 70 FPS. And I did have that benchmarking software on when I was in game. It looked like it was 60, 70 FPS. So this is going to be tragic gameplay here, but we're just going to do the classic Minecraft thing of surviving the night. Let's get our first little house up, let's get safe from the enemies and see what kind of FPS we get while we're doing it. As I say, this is running on fancy graphics. I think I tweaked a couple of things just to squeeze some more FPS out of it. I think I turned down fancy clouds and dropped the render distance down to about 10 chunks instead of 12 chunks. But other than that, we're completely default here. It looks like we're running at a steady 50 to 60 FPS again on 1080p. So that's a pass from me. Let's move on to the next one. Now next up is Counter-Strike 2, a classic esports game, usually one that runs quite well on any kind of system because it is an esports game and optimized for esports. But here is where we encounter one of the crucial things, and you're just going to have to trust me on this one. Because I'm recording these videos on the same computer that's playing the games, we're losing a few frames when I record. Now when I played this on my own, because I really wanted to check, I expected Counter-Strike 2. I mean, come on, surely we're going to get at least 60 FPS out of this. But no, in the recordings, we're getting sort of 30 FPS, 40 FPS. So I went and played this without recording, and I was getting between 50 and 60 FPS. This is on 1080p medium settings. You'll just have to trust me on that one. Yeah, that'll go for all these games. Every game that you see here, we're probably going to be getting an extra 5 to 10 frames extra when you run this on your computer if you bought the Trigkey Mini PC, because you aren't going to be recording. But that's something to keep in mind. So despite the fact that the FPS counter on this video shows 30 to 40 FPS most of the time, when I'm not recording, I'm getting between 50 and 60. Another thing to mention is this was a bot game, which means the CPU is having to work a little bit harder than it normally would do in a normal game, because all the bots are controlled by the CPU, whereas normally all the players in a game would be controlled by real players. In real matches, I would imagine you'd get sort of 10 to 15 FPS more than you're seeing in this video. Moving on to something a little bit more demanding then, Grand Theft Auto 5. Now, it's much the same story here as it was with Counter-Strike 2. I'm running this at medium settings at 1080p with sort of everything in the middle, middle in population density, middle in draw distance, middle in population variety, all of that stuff. And yeah, we are losing we're losing about 20 to 25 FPS. When I was running this, when I wasn't recording, I was getting between sort of 68, 65, 55 FPS, depending on where I was in the city, depending on what was going on. So me recording this video, we're taking a little bit of a performance hit. So whatever numbers you see in the top left on the benchmarking software, add about 20 FPS to that, and that's what you'll be getting when you play this yourself, if you bought the Trigkey Mini PC. Now, of course, as I say, I've been running this on 1080p at medium settings. If you don't care about graphics and you're quite happy to turn them down and squeeze out a little bit more performance, you can absolutely do that. I've got no doubt that if you put a Counter-Strike 2 on low, or if you put GTA 5 on low, or just twiddled and tweaked these settings so that you got it right for you, I'm sure you could hit a solid 60 FPS non-stop. But to be fair, and to sort of showcase what you're going to get in a realistic scenario, if you want to take a more balanced approach, I've tried to keep graphics and frame rate in decent equilibrium, just to show you in a real world use case what you'd get. So Cyberpunk 2077 is up next, and oh boy did this make the Trigkey chug. 12 FPS here. We're on medium settings with everything on medium at 1080p resolution, low population density, you know, everything really turned down to the lowest it can be, but the core settings on medium, and we're looking at 12 FPS. That's indoors in a bar as well. When we go outside, it gets even worse. We drop down to kind of 11, 12. So we're going to drop things down to low settings here, and we're going to enable the AMD Ultra Performance mode, which attempts to really do everything it can to give you more frames, and we managed to jump up to 22 FPS, but at the cost of the game looking absolutely awful. So Cyberpunk 2077, this is our first fail. The Trigkey cannot run this. Really, for my testing, I'd like to see, for a pass, I'd like to see something getting 60 FPS at medium settings on 1080p. That's what my benchmark is for a pass. It's not perfect, but it's passable. You can play, you can enjoy it. That just isn't the case here with Cyberpunk 2077. The temperature's climbed, the frame rate's tanked. That's a fail. Well, there we have it. We've tried a good amount of games. We've tried some high-end games, some low-end games. I think it's given you a good idea of the kind of spectrum this thing can play, and where it kind of places when it's playing them. So I've made us a little graphic here. You have to forgive how crude it is, but I think it demonstrates the point quite well. So on the very left hand side, at the lower end of the spectrum, we've got the Nintendo Switch. That's a handheld device that's designed to play sort of Nintendo only games. It's not designed to be playing cutting edge stuff, AAA titles, anything like that, and the Trigkey certainly sits above it. Then we've got the Steam Deck, a dedicated gaming device created by Valve, and the Trigkey sits above that as well. Why does it sit above it? Well, the Steam Deck typically runs games in 1280 by 800 resolution, and its custom CPU, which we're not really sure what it is some kind of AMD CPU with 2 cores. The Trigkey has a Ryzen 5 with 8 cores. It's as simple as that. This thing is a bit of a powerhouse, and it's got a real low total power draw to go with it. So you can play games and you're not killing the electricity bill. Beyond that, the Steam Deck's limited on RAM. It's also limited on storage. The Trigkey comes with a 1TB, or is it 500 gigabyte SSD, which can be upgraded. It comes with 32 gigabytes of RAM, and it comes with an expandable SSD slot, so you know, there's that. However, where the Trigkey falls short is it's not quite comparable to a gaming laptop. It's not a dedicated gaming machine. It was never designed to be. This, I don't want to give anybody any illusions. This is a computer that can also play some games. It's not a gaming machine. It's not a gaming laptop, it's not a gaming mini PC, it's not a gaming computer. It doesn't have a dedicated GPU inside it. It's got an iGPU, an integrated GPU inside the processor unit. It's more than capable, as you've seen. It can play Bloons, it can play War Thunder, it can play Minecraft, it can play Cyberpunk, it can play Grand Theft Auto, as long as you're willing to make a couple of compromises. And all of that was at 1080p. But don't be fooled. As time goes on, as games get bigger and bigger and harder to run, the Trigkey Mini PC and most mini PCs will begin to struggle. Right now, I'd say anything 2020, before 2020, you're going to be able to play fine if you're willing to make some compromises, as you've seen with the graphical quality. But as we start getting into more recent games, more open world games, God forbid anybody try and run Star Citizen on this thing, I think it would explode. But anyway, I'm going on and on. Hopefully this video has shown you just how capable this thing is and what you can get away with. If you're somebody that wants to do a little bit of light gaming, or if you're somebody that wants to do emulation or play older games, this thing is going to be an absolute powerhouse whilst keeping the power bills to a minimum. Or if you're somebody that's going away, doing some traveling, and you'd like to do some gaming whilst you're away, this little mini PC, you can put it in a backpack, nobody will ever know it's there, connect it to a TV, a monitor, whatever. You're going to be able to get some gaming done on this thing while you're on the go. That's it for another video, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've got any more recommendations, anything else you want to see, please drop your suggestions in the comments box below. If you like the video, like it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And I'll see you again in the next one.